So tonight we're really excited to bring to you our mixed reality panel. We have an awesome lineup of panelists here with us today, as well as a wonderful MC. Just an overview of the night. The panel is going to be about 40-45 minutes. We're going to go into a quick Q&A for about 20-25 minutes, and then we're going to finish up the night with some networking and mingling. Please remember to tweet about the event, tag AcademyXI, and we will pick one lucky tweeter to receive a free AR bootcamp, which is being run by the wonderful Bashir here on Sunday at AcademyXI. So without further ado, I'm going to hand the mic over to our wonderful MC, Saxon Dixon. If you can give him a warm welcome.
Hello, hello. Welcome to A Race to a New Reality. The role mixed reality will play. VR, AR, augmented reality, alternate reality, 360, mixed reality. These are all very new industries, new things, and do they mean the same thing or do they mean different things? Tonight we have an esteemed guest of panelists, tonight to talk about this very thing. On the panel we have Bashir El Khoury in the middle here. We have Tracy Taylor on the left, right. We have Kane on the end, and we have Scott O'Brien in the other middle. So give them a big round of applause. And so to start off, we'll just get everyone to go over why and how they got into the VR, AR, mixed reality industry. Tracy, would you like to start off?
That's well, that could take me like 20 years because that's how long it's taken for me to get here.
The longer you speak, the less I have to speak.
Okay,
so please, that's.
Started off traditional film producer, then got into the niche market of very widescreen, strange aspect ratio content for expos, Olympic Games. Kiosks, large launches, things like that. Started thinking about VR, started at the Pulse, and we realised that VR suited our skill set very well, so that we were already working on huge canvases, we were already working on 360-degree cinemas and things like that. So for us to take our understanding of storytelling across large screens, and it really is different when you're sitting and watching a 240-metre long projection. You have to understand how to create focus and create story points. And so basically we got into VR because it suited our skill set very well, and we also saw that traditional content was harder and harder to get anyone to pay for. So yeah, we decided to jump in, and it's been 2 years, and we've made quite a few VR titles, less AR, but we'll get into that, the reason why. And yeah, that's me.
Great, Bashir?
Yeah, so I come from a background of creative technical. So since the late 80s and early 90s, as we were kids, we started to get introduced to computers. I used to do a lot of coding to create 3D graphics under DOS at the time. And I got super fascinated how you can go into a world and create something out of nothing. And then as I grew out of that and came to Australia, I started a software company called Limpid Logic, and we started to develop mobile apps and games and software, and mostly working from the screen backwards. So everything we do mostly is real-time 3D games or interactive simulations. And as I see it, is that talent, especially in software or 3D or graphics, as a content creator or as a software developer, AR is just the next computing platform. So, and just like water, I see that talent just flows as the technology or the future starts to open up doors. So it wasn't really much of a conscious decision that we thought, oh, we have to pick AR and have to focus on VR. It was more of a natural evolution of any 3D artist or game developer or software engineer to actually flow into that new medium. So all these years we've been working on the screen, and then mobile came out. So we started develop for mobile because this is where people interact with our content. And AR is the next new medium. And arguably it's not new either. People were doing that for years on webcams and all other mediums. So just more of a natural progress of what I do in our passion. And we're passionate about technologies that makes us more human. And what makes us more human than that friction or interactive or that touch point where the human touch the screen or your product or can talk to it in the future.
I don't know about you guys, but I clearly remember the day I was born, and I got out and I just thought to myself, is this it? Is this all? Come on. I mean, I was expecting to see like a $20 American bill floating in front of me, like, you know, we've seen the record cover. But then more seriously, in 2001, I was thinking of what to do when I was retiring from playing sport. So in other words, completely from a non-technical background. And I just imagined that an ambassador of this sport would be visualized sort of holographically in a shopping aisle, and with some kind of intelligence they would know what product is useful for me, and I would be able to kind of browse in a super skeuomorphic fashion, and I'd be able to select and have fun. I'd be able to overlap, I guess, some experience with our actual transaction. And I kind of shared this idea around for near a decade, and in 2009 I organised an event called Online Retailer, which is still around. I think it's in about its 6th or 7th year now. And in that, one of the hero first major corporates involved and anchor sponsors was IBM. And their clear message in 2009 with that event, Online Retailer, was it's got to be more than picture and price, picture and price, picture and price online retail. And actually, still today, it is still largely just boring old picture and price. So not much has changed since I popped out and saw that surgeon with the mask on and shit. You know, like things get more exciting here. And so if we want to, people to feel more motivated to buy a product and to feel it's more contextually useful for their life, we can, of course, use things like augmented and virtual reality. And then it just so happens, in that year, 2009, I had a sports colleague, so small circle there, and he was lecturing in augmented reality at University of Western Sydney. And he showed me some magical 3D stuff popping up off a black and white fiducial marker off an A4 printout from a laptop, and a prosthetic leg and a kitchen assembly, and it basically took about 20 seconds to decide, okay, I'm quitting this online retailer, I'm starting a business with this guy. And after about 4 or 5 tech teams, I eventually came about finding a group of people who were crazy enough to join me and actually put together the vision that I had, or the imagination, hallucination, whatever you want to call it, in 2001 of holographically filming humans. And so now I have a startup called Humence, which is about being immensely human. And that's why I love all the people on the panel, but Bashir's statement about using technology to help us be more human rather than more than human. So that's a bit of a rant. Hope you enjoyed.
Great.
What sport did you play?
It's called floorball in a bandy in Sweden. It's like ice hockey without the ice skates. No, it's not hockey.
Wow.
Yes.
I'd like to see that in VR. That'd be great. So for me, I was a young 20-something child. I just moved to Sydney. Well, I was on holiday with my parents in Sydney. And we went down to Sega World down at Darling Harbour, which was a thing, if you're that old, if you remember. People went to arcades to experience new experiences. And there was the VR machine was there, this 2-person VR device called Dactyl Nightmare. And I waited in line with my $4, which was worth $50 back then. And I put on the massive clunky headset, this big orange thing with clunky gloves and cords coming out like straight out of the Matrix. And instantly, the moment I was in this world, this Dactyl Nightmare world, I just got it. I was completely transported to somewhere else. And even though the space was very low polygon, very small pixels that ran at 4 frames a second, it made me want to throw up. I got the space instantly. I understood the context of where I was, and suddenly it was like a, not that I've tried heroin, like a massive rush of like, oh my God, could life be better than this? And then unfortunately the VR industry didn't really sort of take off. It went into obscurity. It kind of hibernated, and had been growing and gestating for a while. And then I, had to get into the industry and CD-ROMs and the internet and stuff like that. And in that next 20 odd years, I focused a lot on, interactive television, in the UK, interactive media for Big Brother, hybrid, how can we create a hybrid of entertainment between television and online, bringing two different disciplines together, and pretty much concentrate on that for most of my career, as well as some digital agency stuff. Ultimately just waiting for VR to come back. And I went to a meetup at the end of 2015, and it was the release date of the Samsung Gear VR. And I put that on my head in that hot, sweaty room, and the thing fogged up instantly. But I saw a dolphin swim in front of me, and I waved to it. And and in that ridiculous moment, I realized VR is back. This is what I was supposed to be doing with my life. And that night I started up a blog and registered a website. And then from that moment, I started a company. And originally Start VR was meant to be a podcast around how do I get started in VR, because I was clueless. What do I need to do? What skills do I need? How do you make this stuff? Like what and where and how? Just a lot of passion and enthusiasm. But pretty quickly, it never became a podcast. It became a business pretty quickly. And now we're, a VR production studio. We've got offices in LA as well as in Sydney. Well, we've got a desk in LA. But, we've produced over 15 VR apps and made over, an hour and a half of VR content, and, got clients like Qantas and Samsung, and it's like, holy shit, this thing is real. So it's been an amazing journey sort of getting here. And this is really just the tip of the iceberg, because VR is still taking off, and everyone, in the media and the press have somewhat sort of stopped talking about VR to some extent, because now AR is the new exciting thing to talk about, because there's nothing out there and you can speculate about it, whereas VR sometimes can be perceived as a little bit disappointing because, it didn't sell 6 gazillion units and we're not all sitting at home plugged into the matrix. So, it's interesting, the conversation around VR and AR and MR. And I just want to say from the outset that it's not a competition. It's not about which technology is best. It's this realm of technology is very much a new way of computing. It's a new human interface for communicating with each other, and we've got to stop dragging the past and trying to make this a Mac versus PC kind of war, and make this about AR versus VR.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, speaking of what we were talking about just then, and as you can see, we've got a very mixed panel here from all different backgrounds and different walks. And right, yeah. Good segue, right? We have all these terms that define different types of mixed reality, VR, AR, 360, whatever it may be. But how exactly do you define mixed reality, and for that matter, reality in your everyday life, in your business, in your hobby, I suppose? Bashir, I know you have some input to this. How would you describe that?
Describe reality.
Yeah, describe reality, which is really interesting. But yeah, I love that when they say that when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And the idea is that everything we see around us, like Steve Jobs said, is made up by people no smarter than us. And eventually all the dogmas or ideologies and religion and the systems and this building and the chairs you're sitting on was just designed by someone's idea about something. It's quite powerful when you think that the entire reality is shaped by someone's thoughts and imagination. So when we start to look at augmented reality or virtual reality or mixed reality, the question is, what is reality today? And is it really augmented, and is it that something new, or is it that same reality we're just bringing an image from a screen to the physical world? So yeah, some of the things we have to start to think about is that how different this is from reality, and how should we start to think about these things, especially when companies start to create all the products when they are either augmented or virtual, and a lot of them focus on whatever horror experiences to take someone and freak him out, trying to compete who can freak out the other more. And similarly with augmented reality, when you're bringing a digital asset or object into the real world where people are going to interact with it, and that could potentially be smart and knows more about you than you know about yourself, you start to think that the barrier between what's real and what's digital is really breaking down, especially knowing that most people really live in a digital world most of the time, where we talk that they're glued on their screen, but their real presence is where their mind and thoughts and feelings are. So yeah, I would like to also hear from the other panelists what is really reality for them today when everything really is real. The message I got, the 3D character that is here that I'm talking to, that happens to be my brother, maybe messaging, does still exist in my own reality. So.
Scott, would you like to have a...
I'll get last, that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
So our brains are idiots, really. We're quite easily fooled, and that's what VR is basically doing. It's a trick. It's basically presenting information to your brain, which is looking for new information all the time. And if it's convinced enough that what it's seeing is real, then your brain thinks it's real, and that's kind of and what your brain thinks is real is actual reality. So even though I can physically touch Scott, I don't actually know he's here. I actually don't know if you can see him or if I'm just talking to him like Fight Club style. So, it's our brains that really determine what reality is. And I think where we're at the moment at this time of technology and society existence is that we're trying to apply labels to things because it's the only way we can try and make sense of the world around us. So the fact we have terms like VR and AR and MR are just a short-term problem for us to try and make sense of the world. That's what language does. Because it won't be, if we look at the internet, I do liken where we are now to the early days of the internet. At the very start we had dial-up, the speeds were terrible, but it was all about the information superhighway. That's what we called it, the information superhighway. And it was all about smart agents that were going to do all our thinking for us. And the only way that journalists could articulate this was to literally draw a spider's web when we talked about the web. That was the iconography we used. That was the only way we could describe it, or literally cars on a highway with zeros and ones in it. So, and we don't think of it, our life now, we don't actually think of the internet as a thing. It's just pervasive. It's like oxygen, it's like water, it's electricity, it's a common utility. So I think that where we're going to get to with all this combination of technologies is we're going to harken back and go, remember when we called it MR and VR and AR? We won't think of it like that. It will just be reality. It'll be an extension of what we do, and it won't necessarily be about the silly glasses we wear or anything that we put on our face. It will just be second nature to us in the same way that we don't really think about the phone. We don't think about what's going on inside. It just is, and it doesn't matter if the screen is this big or this big or this big or that big, or it's a speaker in the corner. We just know we're connected to each other. So what is reality? It's whatever we want it to be, and what it's going to become, that's an open question.
I don't have a lot to add to all that, but I think we've been augmenting our own reality since we first were put on this earth. I think we augmented it when we created the wheel. I think we augment it all the time to make it easier for us to digest. And so, funnily enough, today my our senior software engineer is over at the largest AR conference in the world, AWE. And I was talking to him about this panel tonight, and I said, well, tell me if there's anything I should mention, that, anything you've seen new that, I don't know about. And I've been working in this industry now for several years, and I like to think I'm an expert on it. And I said to him something about mixed reality and AR, and he said, well, no, the definition's very clear. I'm like, oh, is it? And he said, anything that augments your reality more than 50% is mixed reality. Anything that augments your reality less than 50% is called augmented reality. And I went, really? Where did that come from?
A very programmer's response.
Exactly. And to him it was very clear. So when you're talking about labels, I mean, really? How do you know that you've augmented your space more than 50%? It's just ridiculous. Mixed reality, augmented reality, it's the same thing. In my mind, I'm sure other people have very different views. But it was interesting that he is the expert in AR, and that if you want a label, if you want a definition, that was his.
Cool. There's SR. I don't know if you've heard of that one. You go. Scott's Reality.
Very twisted.
Yeah, very twisted. It reminds me of when I was in university and I had a group of Scandinavian friends and also some Indian friends. And I overheard my Indian friends explaining to my Scandinavian friends what fair dinkum means. And the explanation was, it's fair and it's coming into you. Fair dinkum. Anyway, that's just a little bit of humour. Thank you. Thank you. So anyways, augmented and virtual reality, mixed reality, reality, schmeality. And so, of course, I think Kane said, to communicate to people enough to pull their wallets out, we need to define some things. I would debate the 50% rule, but sometimes it's what it takes for people to participate. But I think you got it absolutely right that we've been augmenting our reality since day one. In fact, by definition of neuroscience, what's in front of us, only 30% gets back through low path and high path to our visual cortex to be processed through the old brain, the reptile brain on top of the spine, and it's through our prejudice of past experiences and the way our chemicals thrash around that we interpret the real world as it comes to us, which means we end up with variations for eyewitness reports, and we end up with blue dress, or what was the other colour? Black? It was black?
Black and
Yeah, gold. Yeah, so...
Definitely gold.
Blue and gold.
Definitely. So, but the other thing is, who can name the first augmented reality device? Let's have a free beer for whoever gets it right. I'm shouting. It's down there.
Anybody? Anybody at all? Hands up.
Who's willing to make a goose of themselves? Because this is a trick question, obviously. Telephone. It was augmenting audio from a location to another remote location. So that was the first augmented reality device that transmitted digitally, more or less. I mean, there may be something else that I didn't know about that DARPA was doing or something. But then the next question is, what is augmented and what is virtual? And what is the base reality? I think it's one of the questions you guys were kind of hinting at. And the problem for me is, I guess, I have gone to too many design meetups and where they talk about human-centered design. And the fact is, unlike the restriction of Aristotle talking about 5 main modalities, there's 30 or more, and depends how much you visit Byron Bay, hundreds. So the thing is, when we put an Oculus Rift on, a HTC Vive, a Samsung Gear or a Google Cardboard, whatever, we're merely virtualizing our vision. And there's 30 other modalities that are still having their own party. So really, the Vive, the Oculus, etc., they're just augmenting the human experience. They're virtualizing the vision, but of course, coming back again, it's the labels and what it takes to get people to pull the wallets out of their pockets and participate.
So speaking of pulling their wallets out and different industries, let's go back to the business side, the industry side, I suppose. Kane, you mentioned that VR, AR, all these things are short-term labels, I suppose. So does that mean you see a convergence point for these technologies, for these industries? Are these industries separate, or are we just calling them different things?
I think they're separate for the moment, but it won't be long till they will bleed into each other. We obviously have VR headsets out in the market that are clearly defined by the fact that they take over your vision and project something else into the retina. And augmented reality, by its definition, is that you're still seeing the real world, but other computer information is being laid over the top. But there are also some headsets that do both. It's taking over the full vision and then provides additional information through that, through camera pass-throughs and things like that. So where we are at now is with the clunky headsets and VR, because that's easier to make right now. It's easier to to recreate a 3D world or video-based world through these types of headsets. And that's before we get down the discussion of other sensory inputs or the other modalities you were talking about. And even augmented reality at the moment, if you think about it, there's multiple tiers of it. There's, they've got your smart device version of augmented reality, which is I hold up my phone and I can see you guys, and across all of your heads I see all your LinkedIn profiles and how you're all connected. That's, I guess, the most basic form of augmented reality at the moment. And then there's, when it does, project directly into my retinas and I can't tell the difference between what is real and what is not. That's when things become mixed reality. So I don't think mixed reality is really going to come into its own, and we'll lose that definition until we have contact lenses that sit over our eyes that can really be selective and choose what light we let in and what other information we decide to project over the top. Until that time, I think we're going to be clumsily working with these types of these words, really. Like I'm clumsily falling over them now.
I think like asking the question, what is the baseline reality, for us to understand what is on top or underneath or around. There is a baseline of what makes augmented or virtual reality or mixed reality or cinematic reality, or even one company thought, we'll simplify things. From now on, it's going to be called articulated naturality. It's true. So what is the base of all these realities, in a sense, is Unreal and Unity, game engines. So they're the engines, and I guess thinking like a car, we're putting chassis, different kind of chassis, different kind of driving styles on top of it. So, but at the base of it are these engines. And so anyone who is familiar with these engines or an expert with them will be able to create for the different realities. And so I think, as you were saying earlier, Kane, about it all just being known as reality, like just as we go to university and many of us, or some of us, studied the humanities, soon we'll study the realities. And it will be this mix of magic, psychology, technology, and so on. So as far as any competition, right now it's competition for PR headlines, clickbait.
Right. So Bashir, I know you're an AR developer and a teacher, I suppose. Do you find that there's a rivalry between AR and VR at the moment? Do you think they're the same technology? Is there a convergence point? When do you think that is?
So yeah, for me, we're just mostly passionate about anything, all types of technologies. And personally, we just see that AR and VR are just new channels. And to tie this back into the previous question about business, just like when the internet first came out, a lot of businesses didn't have a website. And a few years on, if they didn't have a website, they look like they don't have any digital presence because everyone else was on the internet. And with augmented reality coming out and VR as a content, your job as a business is to be in touch with your customer where he needs you most, and to be in front of wherever their eyes are going to be. So when also mobile came out, for a period of time, businesses didn't have any mobile apps. And then later on, if you didn't have a mobile app, that means you don't have any mobile presence. So they all jumped onto that channel. So all these are just extensions to your business, in a sense. Whether it's AR or VR, there is no war. The war is what you're doing in your business or education with the other business. And if your customers are going to consume content and be able to, they want to see things in VR or experience your product, or be able to talk to your avatar standing in their living room, but you don't have one, they're going to tell you, oh, you're not AR friendly yet. You don't have any avatar that can come and massage my back, maybe. And you become out of fashion and complacent, and your competitors will have that edge. So from a technology perspective, it's always been a tool for people to augment, that's right, ourselves and our senses and our businesses and our reach and our intelligence. And AR and VR, they're both a tool. They all can be used for different, in the different contexts, for different purpose. And depending on your business or your need or your education or your passion or hobbies, you're going to pick the path that is just makes sense to you. In terms of evolution-wise, they're going to be accessible to everyone anyway. Just like today, Apple announces the AR kit that it's going to be on the iPhones, augmented reality, just whether you like it or not, it's on your iPhone, most likely going to open it and start playing around. And for everyone else who hasn't played the Pokemon Go, billions of people played it. So it's coming anyway. AR is awesome, and VR is awesome as well. And depending what you're doing, they're going to be amazing anyway. So there is no war, and people who play the war are the ones who are going to lose, and because they'll be left at the back just battling out which one is better, while people who are inventing and working with it and pushing business and humanity forward are at the front. They don't care about that. If some magic pill comes out tomorrow that just talks to me and that becomes a new augmented reality or virtual whatever, we're going to be jumping on it, and we won't be playing that battle.
Can I just add to your idea of what? Sorry, Trace. Is that there is still disciplines. There still is a skill set that's really specific to AR at the moment, and there's a different skill set that's specific to VR at the moment. And you do have people that are very passionate about working in one or the other, but it's not really like a war. It's mostly just about where people have their sense of vision of where the first part of technology is going to really sort of matter to them. But to the outside world, everyone looking at us as VR and AR enthusiasts, we're a bit freaky. We are a bit different. We don't really understand. It's almost like we kind of can see, I guess, or where this is potentially going, and we know that this is inevitable, and that that it may take 5-10 years, but this is transformative technology that's going to change how we live. And I kind of liken it to the X-Men, in that we're all mutants. We maybe have some special little insight or some other kind of special skill set, and some of us side with Xavier and some of us side with Magneto. But ultimately in the end, we're all striving towards a new form of humanity, or a new way of looking at things, or a new way of communicating. So whilst there's not really a war, there's still some battle lines, I think, around how we develop the technology and what's sort of going to come first.
And I'll add to that, because I don't think it's also just the disciplines. I think AR and VR are actually still very separate things, and they won't be in the end, but right now they are used for very different purposes, and you really have to understand what AR is good for and what VR is good for. It's not merging yet, and it won't any time soon. I think the hardware will merge, the technology will merge, but the experiences, basically when you're talking about AR and mixed reality, it's something that is an overlay into your reality. And a lot of that will become functional. It will be very functional, anything to do with getting directions and instructions and wayfinding and all those things that you want to overlay, I want to look up Google here, and it'll all be voice activated and artificial intelligence. And, as you walk along, you'll be getting pushed all sorts of things, and click here for points. And if you go into the shop and buy this, we've all seen the movies. But if you've played with HoloLens or actually talked to any of the HoloLens enthusiasts from Microsoft, what they will explain about HoloLens, and the same thing will be with Google, whatever Google comes out with, and artificial intelligence and AR, to me it's still a very functional thing. It really is. Businesses are interested in it. It's a way of allowing people to get into the nitty-gritty things like the inside of a nuclear power station or open up a bomb. It's great for instructional things. It's great for looking at things in scale that you wouldn't see anywhere else. So it's quite functional. It's exciting, and there's all sorts of places you can go. And yes, you can have holograms that will be talking to you from all over the place. Whereas virtual reality is still very different. It takes over your reality, and it takes you to places, and it makes you feel in a different way. So to me right now, AR and VR are two totally different things. They will merge, but it'll merge in the technology where you'll be able to switch from both. You'll just say, well, you'll have retinal implants basically, and you'll just say, okay, overlay off, I'd like to go to Tahiti now, or I'd like to, you really will, and there you'll be in Tahiti, or you'll say I want to watch a documentary or see what's happening in Syria right now. Whatever it is, there's so many opportunities, and it's only limited by your imagination. But to me, they're very different, and we've got a long time to go before we find a way that those two things are really going to merge and work together. And I get briefs every day from clients that come in and go, I wanted this in VR. And it's an AR experience. What they want to do is, have someone look at something and get some information. Why put them in VR? So, to me, they're very different things.
So to that, getting clients in and having to explain them the difference between VR and AR, do you find there is common mistakes with businesses when they do ask for something? Are they usually asking for something that is not possible, or that doesn't really work with that technology, or you feel like might be a better experience with this technology?
Yes. All the time. Mostly my response is, why don't you just make a 16:9 video and make it really cool? Because, I'm a filmmaker. What we're finding, and I'm sure, Kane, you're finding this as well, drama in VR is really, really a mind... Thank you. What's another word? Trying to be professional. So because you're removing the fourth wall, we've spent so long trying to remove the fourth wall, and funnily enough, once it's removed, you can see it, warts and all. Acting in VR is usually really bad. Drama experiences in VR are usually really bad. We've made some of them. We've made some really good ones. I think we've understood how that goes. But so there are some things, like I love a good zombie movie, but you put me in a zombie VR movie and I just go, well, you're obviously just dressed up in rags with a bit of red paint on your face. It's like, give me back the fourth wall. So when it comes down to businesses, again, some of them, the briefs come in because they want VR. It's new and it's cool, and our customers will love it. So let's make something in VR. We've got this great idea, and it's not a great idea. It's a bad idea for VR. So that I think is our responsibility, is to start working with clients and filmmakers. We mentor filmmakers in terms of understanding what works in VR and what doesn't. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. Kane, do you have any response to that?
Yeah, again, it's people have an idea about what VR is, and it's not until you've tried it and have tried a lot of different things can you fully appreciate what the real potential is and what the potential flaws are as well. So, we've had a couple of situations where we've had some situations where the client hasn't seen the content in the way that it's supposed to be seen. So, they're literally looking at an outstretched 360 video on screen and going, it's all a bit small, and, or if they're putting it in a page, like a Facebook embed, if we're just talking about 360 video, it's like they didn't realize that you clicked to move around, or even what the difference is between watching a 360 video on the web versus watching a 360 video with a headset on. They're two radically different experiences. So, and the hard part is when the client is always right, managing that process to sort of say, well, no, I need to walk you back from the cliff. So, there's a project recently where the client wanted these particular visuals or transitions between scenes, and on screen it looked fabulous. It looked great. It was kind of slick moving and fantastic. But in VR, it was like an explosion of confetti in your face and kind of made you dizzy just by having your eyes open. So there's still lots of errors around that, and but also surprised, like they're watching a video back and they're going, I want some fast cuts, and can I get a close up here and all that type of stuff. I go, well, no, you can't. That's not the way it works. So we're literally taking the VR headset to them, and then the penny drops. Like, wow, this is what we were buying. And so there's still a lot of education to go in that area. And like Tracy was saying, we try and ask up front, does this need to be made in VR? And if it doesn't, then we try and do our best to make sure that it is, suitable for the medium. But what's great is at the same time, these are clients that are putting their money on the line. These are clients that are really looking to experiment and they're looking to create a different type of experience. So, a lot of the clients we're talking to are open to being nurtured in this fashion, and we make sure that this is an ongoing relationship where we help them understand the medium, help them understand why the storytelling in this medium is different and why we shoot things different, and where the different costs are and the different size of the teams and distribution. There's a lot of questions that still haven't been answered from an ROI point of view, but there's some amazing experiences that can transform you. And we've had some great experiences with the clients where the stories we've been able to tell in a 360 environment are far more transformative than anything they could have seen just looking at a screen.
Great, thanks a lot. Any other?
I'll just add a little bit to that. Just because it's a medium on its own, a lot of companies or people kind of do the wrong thing by creating the experience. It's like saying people come to us to create a feature film, and then we go for the demo and put a cassette in the radio and try to play it for them to actually see it and try to feel it. So I think the challenge is narrowing that gap of delivery, perhaps, or the demo. And in most cases, if customers are so disconnected from the production side that it's like saying a chicken shop who wants to create a featured film, they have no idea about production and what's involved and all the process involved into it. And similarly, people are coming from businesses that have no idea about simulation or real-time or 3D or gaming, but they just want to squash in or squeeze in whatever they want to say in a medium that just doesn't work. And for you to be able to convince them not to do it, you almost have to build it to tell them that's why you wasted all that money, because it just doesn't work. And it's very difficult to explain that to them, the picture, without actually making them see it and feel it using that medium. Screenshots obviously don't work, just because, again, instead of showing them moving pictures, you're going and holding the slides and moving them in front of them, try to imagine these will be moving, of course. It's quite difficult.
Right. I completely agree with everyone here. So you were talking about return on investment and analytics and getting your money back and gamification, all these things that you have to convince the client out of doing an experience. Obviously, that brings up the point of when you're collecting analytics on a user, whether there are privacy issues within that, or when you have a user putting on a headset and causes them to be dizzy, you're physically altering their mental state. Do you feel that there is a responsibility with the industry or with developers for the users to avoid that? And how would you go about that, I suppose?
Well, as you know, Saxon, at the Pulse, we don't create experiences that cause anyone to be dizzy or feel sick. Because it's an absolute responsibility, and everything we show a client needs to build the market. Everything we put out there needs to build the market. A time that anyone puts on a headset and goes, that made me feel a bit woozy, I think we've just lost one other person that's never going to go in there again. So we rapid prototype, we white box everything, and even though we've been doing it for a long time, every time a client comes with a new idea, I say it sounds doable, but we just have to white box it, because you just never know. It sounds good on paper and you think, yeah, well, we're keeping the horizon line straight, so it shouldn't make you feel sick, but how quickly can you go down an elevator, all this stuff, and we white box it very quickly just so that it's a proof of concept before we even say yes or no. So I take that responsibility, and my whole team does, very, very seriously.
What's a white box?
Oh, well, it's basically throwing it into Unity without anything real, but just white boxes or circles that represent the things that you would see in that scene, but basically doing the movement in Unity or Unreal, or sometimes even in 3D, Maya, whatever we can do that says, okay, I want to put it in the headset and just show me that that's not going to make me feel sick, or that it's not too fast, or it's not too... I mean, the zombie movie I watched the other day, which was really bad. No one's made a zombie movie lately. Good. All they did, they started and you're on the back of a truck and they threw a zombie in next to you, and the truck simply did that. And that was enough for me to go, oh my God, I can't. That made me feel so sick, because of course I'm standing still. But when you're in something that does that, it totally plays with your senses. So it can be the smallest movements that make you feel sick. So you have to test it, and yes, you have to take the responsibility seriously.
Well, when the motorcar was first experienced by many people and was going around 30 kilometres an hour, people wrote books about how all the trees blurred. They couldn't really see anything clearly, and it was 30 kilometres an hour. And in a way, our brains can adjust to things. But right now, the majority of the population's brains aren't used to this false media or false reality in a sense, because VR and AR and MR, whichever are, have not fully incorporated the physics, lighting and psychology of the real world and integrated it. But it's getting bloody close. So definitely, I think, it's great that most of the realities companies have taken this responsibility. There are some unnamed companies that have put people into roller coasters in their first demo, and that is sacrilege, and it is divorce between your inner ear and your eyes. And the brain says, I'll have none of this, and it usually says it with carrots. So, there are some basic things that were overlooked between 2012 and 2014. But the industry, by and large, is getting a lot smarter now. For privacy, there is an interesting battle. If we want wars, if we want tension, there is an interesting battle where one company is tracking us outside in with cameras, and another company is doing it with infrared. So there are some people... Names. Scott, Kane. So, there are people questioning this. And, so I think privacy is an even greater question by multiples than it is with the 2D rectangles of mobile and desktop and so on. VR and AR has a lot more potential to give away a lot more about your behavior and inclinations, tendency to addiction, tendency to depression, and so on. So definitely from agency level to hardware manufacturer and everything in between, there's stronger responsibilities and potential for exploitation. And on that note, there are people like AREA, which is Augmented Reality Enterprise Association. There's various other associations. There's industry standards that are trying to address this. So, yeah, we are responsible people, believe us.
Everything that you guys said is completely correct. But we're still in a very Wild West stage as well, so you can still walk into a bar and kill someone, and there's not a law enforcement officer to take you away. So, there's no comfort level certifications. There's no grand standard of content like rated G, rated R, suitable for kids, suitable for people with weak knees, suitable for people over 60, with a heart condition. There's no real standard other than a generic terms of service then that you just go, yeah, of course I'm going to sign this, and no one ever reads the details. In fact, we were talking about that before. So there's a long way to go, and I think unfortunately, the way, it'll take something to break before there'll be real effort put in place or litigation put in place. So it'll take someone being sued, I think, before something will really sort of be enforced. And as developers and as people that are trying to create this content, we're all entirely responsible for making sure that the experience is a good one. And like Tracy was saying, the work they make reflects on us and vice versa. The work we all do is responsible for rising the tide of all boats. So we're all working hard, but we're also small companies. We're not multinationals. We don't have teams of lawyers and usability experts that can sit there and fine tune this. Sometimes we have to create something and set it free and hope to God it doesn't kill someone. So, but well, yeah.
I hope not.
Yeah, we're hoping anyway. But I've also seen some terrible, because you can just buy a piece of hardware off the shelf, it doesn't stop someone from using it inappropriately. In the same way you can buy a knife from Bunnings and can go and kill someone. I've seen people put on a Gear VR headset at a trade conference. In fact, a friend of mine tried a soccer game where you headbutt a ball. in a Gear VR. Well, who came up with that idea for a game? But then who came up with the idea of it, using that as a great thing to have at a conference with walls and people around? So my poor friend went for an amazing header and literally clunked her head into, the side of the metal wall and a bit of a gash in her head. So, it's the responsibility of everyone. So, yes. And then there's privacy, which we'll leave for another day.
Great. On that note, we'll wrap it up and open the floor to show the questions from the audience. So thanks, big round of applause to our esteemed panelists. And the floor's open for the next 20 minutes or so. So if anyone has a question, we have a first on here. Just stick your hand up and I'll pass this along.
This is an extension on your last segment. Is there any concern about the psychological impact of all this? Like if you subject someone to a marketing campaign, which actually can be distressing for them, is there any legalities or any concern on your behalf of what you're doing there?
Concern, yes. Legalities, no. I mean, again, it's kind of like, I think there's no industry standard, there's no industry body that adjudicates and passes judgment over content, not at a international level or a local level. I know as developers we somewhat sign over the rights of taking responsibility for the content we put out to the world as well. I'm pretty much sure all the marketplaces to say, if you want to put something up on our store, you're ultimately responsible for it. It's buried somewhere in the terms and conditions. But yes, we're all completely responsible for making sure that we don't scare people, we don't provide subliminal imagery, that we are taking care of someone, because we are effectively there. We're allowing people to open up their mind to the story that we want to share, and certainly we act responsibly around that. But there's no system by which that can be adjudicated.
It's a really good question though, because what they're finding is you can be in VR and you experience it can be amazing. But what happens is that actually becomes a memory. So you're actually remembering that you were there. So we are actually creating false memories. We're evil. No, but it's scary. And I've never thought of it in that way, that if you're doing a marketing campaign and somebody has an experience and then in some way that memory then makes them behave in a different way that then impacts their life, and they could come back and say, well, that was all because of that experience. I don't think there's been nearly enough testing in that area, but it's a very good question. But there's been lots and lots of research on the neurological effects of VR, and Scott, you can probably talk to that too.
Yeah, I think just to add, just like everything else, content you put out in the world or products, just like the Segway you put to charge and it explodes and burns the house, or just like any other TV ads that just entice you to buy something you don't really need at 1 o'clock after midnight. Similarly with VR and AR, the danger with all of that is that you are much closer to someone's mind than any of the others. But as this becomes regulated, just like any content rating for children or a mobile app that someone needs to review to make sure it's appropriate for that particular channel, we just expect that to catch up. And just like every other content, it's going to go and get filtered through channels, and we'll get the R rating or the M rating or whatever. And there will still be the black market where you can download this stuff and consume it quietly by yourself. And that becomes just your responsibility if you just got knocked out or get some sort of damage. That's the same thing as taking any other content through your eyes or through other means.
Yeah. I'm an advisor on an international social media legal association, and there's a woman over in Surrey Hills who has got her association staff to go through all the terms and conditions of the top 20 odd social media. And by the time they got through them all, there was like a printed out paper stack, a mile high. And by the time they got to the bottom, the top half had actually been redone. So they had to kind of reread, and it went through about 2 or 3 cycles until they got to the point where they basically made a 1-page matrix and color-coded what sort of things were covered and what wasn't. There is no AR social media yet that has done similarly, but it will be more or less around the same scenario. Although, so for example, with augmented reality, we're doing this in context with time and place, right time, right place. But what if the data is served offline, and someone drives a Winnebago over the cliff or something like this? It's also been tested by digital artists. Digital artists are our friends. They're the ones pushing the boundaries. So in 2011, a couple of students made an augmented reality app. I think it was 2011, it's somewhere way past. And it was around British Petroleum when there was the big oil spill. And so they made an augmented reality feature where oil came out of BP logos. And if they tried that today, they would probably get a bit more attention, a bit more legal cease and desist. Back then, they got away with it. But also more recently, with Pokemon Go, if there wasn't federal laws, or if there wasn't terms and conditions that Apple forced Niantic Labs, the creators of the game, if they didn't force them to say, no, you can't have your app because it's got this or that danger, someone will find a way. And as it turned out, over in Rhodes, one of the pokey gyms got so popular, it caused massive disturbance. And so eventually, local government found a way to force the game producers to change the game. So there's copyright, there's trademark, and there are existing laws. There's defamation laws as well. And so common law will apply to AR, VR. And however, what is interesting is, at the end of the day, who is responsible? Is the App Store responsible for permitting this app to exist, or similarly with Steam and Android? And we know submitting apps on these other stores, it's a little bit easier than getting it through the Apple App Store. So this will be a challenge to the gatekeepers, perhaps first of all, but a fertile playground for digital artists.
Hi. So this is to do with the content production question. In your experience, we know that like with augmented reality, you can kind of play hours on end, as we've seen with Pokemon Go. But from a VR perspective, is there a limitation on how much you can stay in the VR world for? And then how does that impact your own production and how you present that to the client?
I'll just do a quick one. So there is a sort of a limit or an average people have with mobile augmented reality, is maybe a few minutes. But there are experiences which go way longer, and it's very individual. But with things like HTC Vive, my first experience in an application called Tilt Brush was 5 hours. I lost all sense of time, and I could have gone longer. And so recently a world record was created at 50 hours. So, as the form factor comes down, as the cord reduces, as we get inside-out tracking rather than outside-in, there's all these factors that are happening over the next 6 to 18 months, and even HTC incorporating AR with VR in the one headset within the next 1 to 2 years. And Microsoft and Facebook are also working at both. This is going to dramatically change, and I feel within 24 months, and I'm saying this having made AR eyewear back in 2010, that within the next 24 months, there'll be some of us wearing glasses, and through the day, we'll wake up in reality, and we'll switch in and out of augmented and virtual. And so, I mean, for me, mixed is basically augmented reality with a fancy marketing name. But we'll just switch in and out of these different realities, and we may even just wear these glasses all day.
Yeah, what he said.
I just add just that as a content company, that's something a challenge we have all the time. And as Scott mentioned, it also depends on the hardware as much as it depends on the user as well, because you get your C legs, you get your VR legs. It's something you do acclimatise to. But sometimes someone's first impression can be overwhelming and it can be quite intense. So as you become more acclimatized to it, you can spend far more time in there as well. And it all depends on the hardware. I would not spend 3 hours in cardboard, I can tell you that much. I can barely look at it for 2 minutes. But one of the things that it's also to do with the size of the media and how you deliver the media is also the bigger issue. So if you were to create video, for example, we're talking about massive file size, and can someone afford to download 2 gigabytes of data to watch, a 15-minute experience? That's a lot, and that's why we can't necessarily deliver a feature-length movie at the moment, is because just the size of the media is impossible. And for us, that's actually one of the challenges we're trying to take on. So we've got a project coming out in the next week. Small plug, it's called Atlas Obscura VR. And what we've tried to do with it is we've tried to create a series of content where each episode goes for 15 minutes. So we're trying to see if we can set a tone of, can people stay in a 15-minute experience, and then will they potentially buy 3 episodes of that content? And if so, how long will they last? Where will they go? How often will they come back? And so we're putting a lot of metrics and tracking data in there. Not tracking anyone individually. We're just tracking, participation in the experience. And that's our goal out of this app, is to see, can we get people to stay in VR for an extended amount of time, and if so, how long, and what mechanics can we use to sort of draw people back into that content as well. And so we're doing that by using a range of different mixed media. Some of it's photography, some of it's traditional HD video, some of it's 360 video, photogrammetry. We're using a whole range of different techniques to try and create a story that's interactive and compelling, and hopefully keeps people in there for a long amount of time. It's a big experiment. We don't know if this is going to work. We'll find out in the next month, and I can hopefully answer that question for you.
Yeah, I'll just think to add in terms of like the health recommendation, how much you can spend in VR. It's basically just like the real questions like, did anyone die in VR yet? And just like video games, there are cases where just kids been playing, or people, for like 3 days non-stop, and they just died from not eating. In terms of VR, I don't think there's any research really about what is the impact on the mental health as well, or on anything else, what is recommendation for your eye or your brain. Basically just take it off whenever you feel tired.
People have lost a lot of weight.
And if you lose a lot of weight and that's your goal in life, just keep going for it. But yeah, there's no real answer.
Sorry, we've got a question.
Thanks so much. This is really cool. Just wanted to ask about how real is this reality? How universal is the perception of these realities? And kind of a bit of a left field question, whether it's a distinctly human kind of experience, or is it something that is accessible to, I don't know, other species?
Here's the interesting part, is that everyone's got his own reality, and all of these new realities, if you want to call them, are created by people just like you, except that's their own perception of imagination or things or the new spaces they create. So at the end of the day, and talking about species or alien minds or animals, that's really interesting. Well, from the perception of an animal, we think we know what they think, but we don't really. We just perceive our own truth and realities and write white papers and do PhDs about them and try to enforce those on others, that this is my reality and this is what the world we live in and this is how it's like. But at the end of the day, it's in the eye of the beholder. You're just getting a new reality for yourself that happened to be created by someone else's reality or perception. And these are minds that are all around the world that have been exposed to all sort of values and struggle or whatever moral or dogmas or religions. And if there were to be any concern, it's rather I wouldn't see it as a concern or as a barrier. I would see it as a much more open world for exploration and getting to learn new cultures or new mindsets, or getting to experience the artist or the creative that is creating all these experiences. So how universal it is from your perspective or from everyone else's, I'd say that there's nothing universal that we both experience the same way. Everyone's got his own side of the story. What my eyes see are different than what your eyes see. And on top of that, what my mind interprets, this is where it all gets really into completely different universes.
I just quickly, it's real enough for people to walk the plank and fear they're going to fall 100 meters. It's real enough for paraplegics to trick the brain and start walking again. It's real enough for people to get intimate, and for what were webcam girls to monetize like 100 times more than what they did on a rectangle screen. So as some kind of understanding of how humans appreciate each other in this space, that's one measure. and it's real enough for people to buy stuff. So the prediction, is that 100 million people will be buying in AR within 2.5 years. And I think, there are some easy criticisms of what is faked and so on, but effectively for behaviour change and for path to purchase and things like this, it's real in many ways, in many transformative ways that'll disrupt industries within the next few years.
Oh yeah, just quickly. I work in the healthcare education sector, and Tracy, you talked about creating memories. And so, rather than sort of focus on the negative side of things, I'd like to focus on the positive side of things, which,
So I'll hand to Kane in a moment because he is the expert in this area.
Okay.
No, absolutely. Mental health is almost the no-brainer of VR, and I will hand over because you are the expert in this. Mental health. Yeah, but a lot of the research has been done around VR and mental health. So there's a lot more research out there in that field than anything else. So the Army's been using it for years for post-traumatic stress disorder, exposure therapy, everyone, mindfulness. Basically, you can do in VR what I can never do in an hour of trying to meditate. It can take you somewhere straight away and get you out of your head. And so there's lots of VR apps for mindfulness, for meditation. We're actually working with schools now on on an education platform that allows mindfulness in education. But yes, mental health, absolutely. It's proven that if you have high blood pressure, you can put someone in VR for 2 minutes and their blood pressure will come down. I mean, there's so much research out there. It's really exciting, and I think that's one of the most... We haven't talked much about the positive ways VR can really be used in
so
this world.
what I'm interested in, VR can be used as an individual experience. It can be used as a group experience. I'm interested in the notion of being able to conduct real-time training with people who may not be co-located, and whether or not that actually exists at the moment, and whether that is actually being done at the moment. So and what the evidence is around skills retention, or skills knowledge transfer.
Well, it just so happens in August, the Pulse is launching the Pulse IQ, which is our education and training platform. I have a feeling that what we've done, blended with what Scott's doing in terms of volumetric whatever you're doing, and Kane's stuff, I think if we could all get together, we would create a really compelling platform. We've done some of the smarts, you guys have done the other smarts. Somebody should just pay us a heap of money to just get it done. Yeah, but definitely it's happening in different pockets all over the place, and there's different platforms and different tech out there that's available. So you can come and talk to me later if you like.
Look, not much more to add. In that, there's a lot of. I know there's a company called Build VR that's working in providing VR as an experience for people suffering dementia, and obviously there's a lot of great research happening around there. There's a lot of research happening in around the effects of VR in training and on mindfulness and everything that Tracy mentioned. I think one of my business partner, Martin Taylor, is very much into the psychology around VR and the impact on mindfulness and the parapsychology of the brain. But we did a project with the Chris O'Brien Lifehouse around about 6 months ago, where we brought VR into the hospital. So people who were receiving chemotherapy treatment, we did a test to see how could we bring VR into an environment like this. It's mostly around how would people operate it, what would the experience be, how could we put it in line with everything else that was going on. And there's if you go to our website, there's a lovely little 4-minute video on there that it's quite heart-wrenching. I cry every time I look at it. It's beautiful. And it's mostly about pain distraction therapy. So even just a couple of minutes inside VR can take someone away from the harsh realities of sitting in a chair for 8 hours a day. And I think the long-term opportunities there as well around how do we bring teenagers and young adults who are busy with their lives to sort of come in and receive their treatment. An experience like this is a great way to kill two birds with one stone insofar as of being able to explore your world. That was a horrible analogy. But to be able to sort of go somewhere else, be transported somewhere, and that's what's really unique about VR, is that escapism and the positive effects that can provide as well. Yeah.
Great. I think we have. Oh, sorry, Scott, please.
Okay, I was just saying. Also, there are many points of evidence on the eye contact between nurse and patient helping heal, and so in making volumetric video, holographic humans, if you want to use that term, as well. The holy grail, in a sense, is to get the definition of the eyes right, and the whites in the eyes to connect, facilitating oxytocin release. And so, in a world of dopamine, we need a little more oxytocin.
I think we have time for one more question.
Thank you very much for this informative information. I just wanted to ask you, maybe a little bit, in the 24 months or a little bit further when the hardware is developed and we've got higher bandwidth and so on, the application for news. So you're getting closer to people, influencing people. We can see how the current news influences people, and we've got, truthful news and we've got fake news. So I guess it can be used for both sides of the coin. Maybe in a virtual real-time environment, you have less chance for the CNNs or different, standard media to organise people in a way you would normally do it. But so maybe it's the networks, and maybe it's freelancers and so on. How do you see that evolving in society?
So New York Times, every day they put up a 360 video. So their journalists are actually out there shooting on 360 already. So it's, if there's a demonstration in Krakow, or I don't know when the last demonstration in Krakow was, but whatever there is around the world, every day there's a 360 video going up that allows you to experience it in an immersive way. So I think that's a really forward-thinking approach from New York Times. That's pretty much all I have to say about news. I don't really work with it any other way. Yeah?
Well, I didn't really get the question or why you're asking it. So thinking that it's just a medium, that you're just delivering content to it, questioning the source of the content, which is the data, it's an ongoing problem that we're still questioning every day, every news we hear, whether you're a freelancer or you're a corporation or anything like that. But in terms of the medium or the channels available to make it accessible for your viewers or people, it's going to be accessible to everyone. And most likely, the bigger the companies, the more quicker they're going to jump on board to establish their own platforms and channels. This is like blogging. So yeah, the question is, where do you want to fit in, and what kind of stories you want to tell to who? And always think that although the technology itself is moving along with the market, it's actually creating the market itself as it's moving. It's a bit unclear as still what kind of business you want to establish in that space, or as a freelancer producing the content, how are you going to produce the content? The tools are slightly different than what YouTube or other channels are used to. And the answer today would be to always stay informed or start to learn about these platforms. Like there are great academies already trying to kind of prepare content producers or anyone to create the content and see how. So when the time comes where people are on these channels, you're already aware of the tools you can use to get there, and how to tell the stories and the forms and the mistakes that people like us are doing every day. And how can you get that competitive edge and kind of join that channel?
So when there's news delivered on television or online video, of course, the rectangle is defining what you're forced to look at, and the reporter is trying to fill the blanks with words to maybe give you a better sense of the environment, or what other environment affected this one, and so on, right? And of course, then when one of the first 360 journalistic efforts happened in Haiti, the journalistic world went nuts. Like, this is amazing. It really helps transport someone there to get the real feel, and they change kind of physiologically, not just psychologically, with that. But one thing has been in the last 2 or 3 years the use primarily of 360 video, but the next step for you to look out for, and you were kind of talking about some timelines of what's to come in reference to journalism, I feel is exciting is the ability to walk around the environment, not just have your head locked in a position which the camera person dictated. And so with that, the story becomes even more of an experience, even more greater recall and shift of behavior again. So are you a journalist?
No,
Oh,
not,
okay.
no.
All right. There's not many around left, I guess. Controversial. But anyway, I hope that changes with this medium. And ironically, journalists have actually been early adopters to new technology. So I think this is a great first stop for AR and VR. And I mean, already 15% of the US population is using augmented reality to have dog tongues and bunny ears. It's called selfie paradise. And so journalism, I hope, can be a next legitimate wave of adoption.
I guess the dream is unbiased journalism, where we can put a camera and allow it to capture the environment, and then as users we can actually choose to interpret the story on our own terms. And I think that's an ideal. I don't know if that sells advertising, unfortunately, so it's the model of journalism that leads to how it's paid for is still broken. So I don't know how we're going to fix that, but from a technology point of view, I don't see it's long until, in the first instances we have drones that are able to be deployed directly to locations and capture 360 in real time, and then you would be able to move between different locations and see things in real time. There's a lot of technical headaches about passing data and live stitching and all that, but that's only a first pass. But just by virtue of choosing where to place that camera is still some form of editorial control. Did I put it at the front of the march, or did I put it where the guys were throwing chairs through windows? So until we've actually got full control over ourselves, we're not going to do that. But there'll be also opportunity. I think what we're going to see is more citizen journalism, where everyone's got their phones out with twin cameras on them that have got some level of depth perception as well, so they're able to capture spatial data as well as the video data. So if you've got a camera and I've got a camera and you've got a camera and we're all capturing the same scene, there's also that room for us to, as citizens, tell a story as well and be able to combine those three images together to create this kind of photogrammetrical environment that we can dip in and out of as well. So, the technology is going to get very strange and real. I don't know how quickly it's going to happen, but, the technology is already there. A lot of it is baked into the handsets we've got. It's mostly down to bandwidth and someone trying to find a way to commercialize that and make it possible as well. That's a really good question, though.
Thanks a lot, everybody. I think that's going to wrap us up for tonight. So round of applause for our esteemed panelists. And I think we'll be around for a few...